Hello team, welcome back to another Line War cast. This is your map today. It's a 2v2 between Alpha Team and Bravo Team, of course. On Alpha Team, Igor King in blue and Yosef in red. And on Bravo Team, Justin Addict in orange and Fantasy in teal. Alpha Team spawning on the left-hand side, Yosef's in the top left, Igor King is in the bottom right, and Bravo Team obviously on the right-hand side. This is Justin Addict to the north, and then Fantasy spawning in the bottom right. Just now going for one airport and 3 factories very quickly. There's an energy source pretty close, so that's going to be able to keep these planes moving. And 2 towns immediately with an industry out of Yosef, and then a forward factory. Blue going for three factories, 2 of which are going for tanks, 1 SAM, and then a quick follow-up of a town for Blue. SAMs and tanks have very good synergy. They'll probably be able to do quite well against whatever planes come out of Justin Addict's airport, which right now is an interceptor, likely to scout for both teams. This is what Alpha Team can see. Bravo Team, of course, won't be able to see Alpha Team's starting location yet. Fantasy might scout it first, though, with this group of infantry. They're heading right towards this energy source, which either is to secure this energy source or just to scout whether Alpha Team is here. And a forward factory for Fantasy, who has a town and a port, an industry, a few barracks, 2 industries rather, and a few barracks in the bottom right. There's a bunch of trade routes on the right-hand side. It's definitely going to be in Bravo Team's favor to secure these because of the starting locations. But we'll see if that, like when they decide to take that, if they do, and how long it takes Alpha Team to figure that out, because there's no trade routes on the left-hand side of the map for Alpha Team, so over time, this could be a lot of economy that Bravo Team gets sort of for free to some degree. Igor King's going for a power plant right away to keep these tanks running. There's 2 more on the way. And Fantasy is capping this energy well. They may be able to cap that territory, but Blue is going to make sure that that's dislodged relatively quickly. First interceptor is out for Justin Addict. And a helicopter as a follow-up as the second plane out of that airport. And we have some bombers on the way for Yosef in the top left. And Red has 2 energy sources, so there won't be much of a concern to keep those bombers moving once they get those refineries set up. And here comes the first little battle of the game. 4 infantry for Teal are going to back up. And then this is actually Teal's command, so they are going to be attacking. Yeah, this is what's happening. I don't even understand how they're moving back. This must just be Blue's commands. I've been playing, like, you gotta let me know in the comments, folks, if you want the commands on or off. Lately, I've been turning them off, but I've seen some feedback that maybe it's nicer when they are on visual to see what each player is trying to do. Here comes a helicopter and interceptor for Orange. The interceptor won't do much except just scout everything that's going on. And this is the scouting for Bravo Team, so they can see that the town's been taken. They still don't know where Yosef is. And 2 more factories for Teal, which it's a good location to build them because this part of the map is likely going to heat up because it's really the only way for Blue to get out of their position. And it is tanks from Teal. Some infantry taking on those 2 tanks. Probably no real risk of these forward factories falling over. And there's an energy source that Fantasy is going to be able to secure to keep their own tanks moving. And certainly if Blue could destroy these 2 factories, that'd be a big play, but the helicopters will probably make sure that doesn't happen. Unless Igor King moved these SAMs up right away and got lucky on a little bit of the RNG of engaging an airport unit with SAMs. First energy's on the way for Yosef. Another barracks for Justin Addict. And this is going to be a lot of units for Bravo Team. to fight off Blue, who has started going for another airport or an airport of their own and a barracks, the first barracks of the game for Igor. And the trade route is starting to get set up, or at least the first town in the system is being built right now. We'll see how quick Justin Attic builds this town to like connect this port and get those merchant ships moving. And likely for Bravo Team, this is the priority to deal with. Because 4 tanks, and more tanks on the way, for Blue, can very quickly overwhelm and destroy buildings a lot quicker than you, like, maybe it would seem like. If these 4 tanks just get on these barracks as is with only 1 tank in defense, they would be able to destroy all these buildings. Yosef continues to build up. This is going to be a large artillery and infantry force that's going to be able to start putting pressure on Justin Attic very quickly. And let's see if I was even remotely right about saying that these tanks could kill these buildings. The helicopter is going to be great for the defense, but certainly one of Teal's factories will go down. Another tank pops for Fantasy. This will be great in the defense. And maybe with 3 helicopters, it'll kill it quick enough. It's about as close of a call as you could possibly imagine. So one of the barracks stays alive. With the artillery showing up for Justin Addict, if they get set up, the tanks... It's an interesting dynamic in Line War in these situations. If the tanks get on top of their artillery, they're going to be able to kill the artillery relatively quickly. That's where the helicopters come in and where some of the infantry for Orange and Teal can kind of provide like a little bit of a body block. So it's a little bit of a dance in positioning. This is going to be a problem because this Red Army has shown up in Bravo Team's vision, and it is pretty substantial. It's this 2-town start from Red is really giving the economy to push pretty hard here, and might see some more production buildings for Red go down to add to that push. Town is almost done for Fantasy. And completes now. We'll see how quick the port goes down. And here comes a little bit of maybe a counter push potential for Bravo Team, as long as Justin Attic can kind of hold this off from Red on the left-hand side. First helicopter is done for Blue. A second airport is on the way. For Justin Attic, this mountain range, and for Bravo Team in general, this is a very strong position. There's no SAMs here right now to deal with the helicopters. So it's good unit composition from Blue. And it's hard for the interceptors of Justin Attic to get to this helicopter because of the positioning of these 5 SAMs. The bombers are now in the fight. There's almost a full dot of SAMs for Orange. So in low numbers, the bombers are going to have a tough time getting anything done here. And there's only a few SAMs for Red, so the interceptors for Orange would have a better time on that part of the map. Tanks get by the defensive line. 2 tanks are greeting them in defense. And we'll see what the plan from Blue with these tanks are, whether it's just a jump on a building or even drive by to try to get to this town and the port, or what will in the future be a port. And town for Justin Attic with a dock. This fight is heating up a little bit. Defender's advantage for Orange is pretty big here because these buildings are a little bit closer to the fight until this factory comes online. And Red sending some forces down to the south to secure this mountain range. And second airport on the way for Red. So really 2 main battles going on at this point. There's a barracks close to this dock that's producing a transport boat, so presumably Justin Attic's going to go across this little channel and start capping this top right island. And as long as Bravo Team just defends these pushes on these 2 fronts and then builds up economy, they will likely be fine. The third airport from Igor King is a kind of a big deal. There's still no real anti-air here. The SAMs, as mentioned, are going to provide great support for any interceptors. Which just an Attic might not even have an interceptor left at this point. First airport for Fantasy, build some more industry, some more barracks. It's bombers and helicopters from Igor King out of these 3 airports. And over time, the numbers that you can start to accumulate from airport units, they can do a lot of damage very quickly if your opponent doesn't have the necessary like anti-air for it, since it takes time to build the anti-air. By the time that, you know, 6-7 bombers show up to start destroying these buildings, Teal may have not started SAM production, right? And then you lose the factories and then it's tough to get SAMs. They can definitely sneak up on you. This is a really good counter push from Justin Addict. It's going right towards the production of red, and Yosef might start falling into a little bit of trouble here. There's another factory on the way, which is the right call. And the first bomber's going out. Start softening up some units, some buildings, 2 more on the way. Something that is going to relieve the pressure from red is when blue starts pushing on this front in earnest, or sends these tanks around through this forest and mountain range. Tanks, of course, get that movement speed penalty when they're moving through forest and mountain, so it's best to keep them in the open. They're trying to get through the right-hand side of this defensive line at the moment. And Fantasy's got enough units here, so it's going to be expensive for these tanks to get by. The artillery pieces are going to be able to constantly shell these things. They don't do a ton of damage to the tanks, but over time, if the tanks aren't able to just move past, that damage adds up relatively quick, and great body block by those tanks and infantry. And that's an expensive push to lose that many tanks. The artillery for Orange is already deployed, so this is kind of a tough position to break for Yosef. The defender's advantage is now in their favor, since the production buildings are closer. And Justin Addicts is getting across the top right-hand side of the map. Still no ports as of yet. Another town for Fantasy. Good counter push from Yosef, who's put down 2 barracks in the north. This is a non-trivial amount of infantry that could get on top of the energy source for Orange, and then all those helicopters would stop flying, which could be a big deal. Still just 3 bombers for blue. Fantasy's going for a commando drop. We'll see where that is going in a second. And there's not quite enough SAMs to deal with these 2 helicopters. Luckily, there's an interceptor that shows up, and we'll get a few shots off before these SAMs reinforce. And the commandos are going right towards this refinery. Luckily for Igor, they have a second refinery, but the 2 commandos are going to be able to destroy this pretty quickly. Another factory for blue on the way. It's a very tough sort of position because of the geography of this map and where this defensive line is. The only real option is to go around it, really, through this forest. But then that opens up the possibility for Fantasy to just counter push towards the gas and the airports. Another factory on the way for Yosef, who's starting to push back on Justin Addict and making gains in the north of the map here. It's a good fight on 2 fronts. Here comes the SAM transition for Fantasy, with 3 of the factories going for SAMs. They so far are getting picked off by the bombers. The bomber numbers are getting a little bit scary. There's 5 of them right now. There's no interceptors to deal with this. Refinery did go down. But I think as long as these 2 SAMs get out and they group up, the progress of the bombers will at least be very stunted. But that's why we watch, because who knows? It would be a huge coup for Blue if they were able to destroy 2 of these factories pretty quick, maybe even the 3rd factory. That would kind of change things here. But Fantasy's got a lot of units built up. And it's really just 4 factories versus all these units and whatever is left for Teal. So I say that to mean that Teal might actually have more units there. Sort of scary counter push for Justin Attic, but what we saw earlier in the game probably will just happen again, which is Red will push kind of close, and then defender advantage kicks in for Justin Attic, and they'll push back. There's such a large number of artillery up here, and the infantry have to move through the mountains, so they go much slower since it's orange-controlled territory. They're just beelining towards the refinery, which is the right call, I think. Although Justin Act really only has 2 units that need energy anyway. There's a 3rd one that just popped, and they're gonna get grounded as soon as this refinery explodes. And the SAM count is good enough for Fantasy at this point. 2 of the bombers go down. There's only 2 left. And a handful of helicopters. The beep beep we hear is Justin Attic losing this gas. The infantry is gonna smartly not run into this mountain range, the certain doom, at all those artillery pieces, and instead go towards a town and a dock that aren't really defended. And strikers now for Fantasy out of this airport. There's 3 SAMs sort of in position, but all of these airports and all this infrastructure is definitely within range of the strikers for Teal. And they could do a ton of damage. Red will likely destroy this town, just because the artillery is going to take a while to get there. But fortunately for Bravo team, it's not really a trade route yet. So it's not as much eco-denial as could have been possible. Helicopter's still doing a great job on this frontline artillery. There's no real option for Blue to just push, though. But in good news for Alpha Team is Yosef's really opening up this part of the map. Because Justin Attic's going to have to defend this and focus only on this, because this is a pretty big red army. And this time they won't have the helicopters to help with the artillery pieces. So the town does go down for Justin Attic. The dock will stay alive. All of these artillery pieces are going to be able to go back towards the front and help out with the defense at home. And we'll see where these commandos go. So they are on the bottom. And they're actually capping in the back here. This could be very sneaky. Fantasy could set up a little bit of a proxy base there if Igor King doesn't see it. And it is pretty sneaky. It's pretty hard to see sometimes that one of your territories have been capped by the opponent. And the SAM count for Teal is pretty healthy at this point, really shutting down all of these blue planes that don't really have a place to go except for over here. If the bombers started going towards Fantasy's main base, they could do a ton of damage, probably take out an airport. And Igor's King is digging in. It's cool, the geography of line war. And we see it really playing out here, is that no one wants to move through these forests just because their units will move so much more slowly. This is a very wide front for Alpha Team. And pretty soon, Fantasy might have to send some of these units to help out with the defense of Orange's base, which could open up Blue to counter push into this choke. No other real, economic developments on the map as of yet. The proxy barracks is here, with more commandos dropping in. And Just an Addict destroys this dock because they were negative in the money. And they no longer need boats. And here come the blue bombers. There's only 3 SAMs in this mountain range. The bombers have terrible vision. But once they see them, they should be able to take these things out since some of the SAMs are already damaged. And there goes one. And not the second as of yet. All this yellow artillery is finally showing up, just in time to maybe defend this airport. Unfortunately for Just an Addict, they move the helicopters off this airport before it explodes, so they don't lose the helicopters with it. Except for, do the helicopters just land back on the airport? Okay, so this is unfortunate timing. If this airport does go down, because the helicopters would be lost. But maybe it's perfect defense. I think Red might actually just be targeting this, and they are. Which is probably the right play, because they're not going to win this fight against Orange, so if they're staying at all, they may as well try to take out the airport and the helicopters with it. And the longer this kind of choke develops on the map, the more we might have to look out for a rocket being used by either team for all this congestion. SAMs in the defensive line are going to shut down these strikers. This is a great call from Eager King. Barracks is now up and commandos being built, taking away from Blue's economy. And the airport does go down. These 2 helicopters must have lifted off just in time. I actually assumed that the airport wasn't going to fall. So good snipe from Yosef. Just an Addict is building economy on the top right and a refinery. Those things are super safe from Alpha Team. There's no real easy way, besides maybe Red making a dock up here, to land. That's some more production from Red being built. This is the second refinery that Igor King is deciding to build. 3 airports full of a decent amount of bombers at this point. They just have to find a position to go where there are no SAMs. And tanks are going to try to make a breakthrough in this little gap, or even get on top of these SAMs. Great defensive line from Alpha Team here. And a little bit of a standoff. It'll be tough for either team to push into all of this because of these mountain ranges for both sides. And all these blue tanks are going to be destroyed over time because of the amount of teal units that are blocking them. 2 more barracks here for Fantasy. As soon as Blue realizes that these are here, the bombers are going to be able to clear out those buildings relatively quickly. But the bombers aren't going to be able to clear out the commandos all that fast. So we'll have to see how many commandos Teal actually gets built. And whether they can destroy the energy in the factories. Great play from Eager King to destroy this town and port. That's a lot of economy for Teal that's being denied. And Yosef continues to push up to this defensive line and take all this economy. Still a bit of success up here for Yosef. Over time might be able to take more from Just an Addict. The bombers aren't going to be able to get a ton done because they're going to fly into all these SAMs that are in a great position to defend this artillery line. And does anyone really even have the economy to build a rocket? I don't think so. So this is just going to be a meat grinder of factory and barracks and airport units. Yosef's going around the top side of this defensive line, so the defensive bonus is negated when attacking from the side like this. Now, this is a very strong push from red. Making good progress in the north. These artillery pieces are up here probably trying to deal with all this infantry and take back this economy, but that means that there should be more red or artillery pieces, pardon me, in this fight, and there definitely are. Here comes the backstab. So at this point, blue is going to recognize that there are commandos. But only after they destroy a power plant and a city, or a town, pardon me. More factories on the way for orange to deal with all this red artillery. Luckily for Just an Attic, this mountain range is a super good defensive position. So it'll take longer for red artillery to move through this. But the question is whether Just an Attic's going to have enough. Fantasy is starting to push a little bit with some of these artillery, but look how many bombers that blue has. As long as blue has the energy to run these bombers, it's a huge asset for Alpha Team. So in the north, Just an Attic's getting a little bit more control back and starting to cut off any reinforcements for red. But kind of at this position, it's really tough. The SAMs are maybe going to take on this artillery. I think the SAMs are going to lose that fight. And in general, pretty low econ game, which means that there's a lot of fighting going on. One of the factories gets snipes, great backstab by Fantasy, who's going to get another barracks as well. And beginning to get through this defensive line. But there's gonna have to be a decision there's a decision to be made, pardon me, about how and when to defend against all this red artillery, because if they move up towards Just an Attic's main base, they could do a ton of damage. SAMs are being built and dug in on the bottom for blue, who's lost all this bottom left economy. We'll have to get that back. But at least these SAMs will stop any further drops from happening or make it a lot more difficult to do so. A lot of tanks from Teal have the potential to just move through this mountain range and then head towards Red's main base, which would at least delay a lot of the reinforcements. So many SAMs, the bombers are going to have very little success here. And that quickly, 4 of them get taken out pretty much simultaneously. Great snipe by these commandos, who continue to be super annoying. We'll probably win this fight, or at least be able to get away. But Yosef keeps pushing this army closer and closer. This is a good amount of units for Just an Attic, but there are bombers that could deal with this up in the north, and I think this is exactly what's about to happen. But this proxy base is still set up, another barracks being made, 2 of them in fact on the bottom left, which will preoccupy Blue's attention quite a bit. But Red continues to push across the map and get into this mountain range. The defender's advantage is pretty good for Bravo team here, just because these factories are so much closer to the fight than obviously Red's production structures. And the big wild card is whether this push works through this gap for Fantasy. Because if it does, it'll mean all these bombers have to stay at home. And they can't loop around the top or go try to attack Fantasy's base. Replacement airport for Just an Addict. And they've capped the whole top right, built a town up here. It's great eco. Tanks are sort of going in one by one. I mean, even with 4 tanks, I don't think they would be able to clear this, unfortunately. So this is a very scary artillery army now for Yosef, which is threatening some of these Teal factories, and this is probably one of the reasons why Teal is just going to start pushing through here, and this puts a lot of stress on Blue. There's still a lot of bombers, but all these SAMs are showing up with these artillery pieces. And as these Blue artillery try to get into this defensive line, they'll go within the range of Teal's artillery and then set up. They won't stop to attack the units. It's part of a little bit about it's a little finicky with the defensive lines, because this thing is going to run all the way here and just start getting shelled as it's setting up. And it does get one shot off, but that's it. SAMs are in great position against these bombers. But with the help of the artillery, they do get a farm. This artillery is still actually up here with some infantry for Orange, which is really delaying all these infantry from being able to put more pressure on Yellow. City on the way now for Just an Addict, who may just be giving up this position with that move. Not that it's even a bad play. It can be a very good play once you realize your starting position is totally compromised. So I think Red's about to do a ton of damage to Orange, but Teal's also about to do a ton of damage to Blue, and that'll be the game state we find ourselves in. Still a barracks in the bottom left for Teal, building commandos. And there's just not enough at home for Blue. Who will very quickly lose probably all 3 airports here. 2 factories, one of which is building SAMs, the other one building artillery, is just not going to be able to muster enough force to deal with this. The firecrackers for Teal are just too good. And there's too many of them. But good push from Yosef, who may be able to get one more factory. And also, this fight in the north has now started turning for the worse for Just an Addict. There's just too many artillery pieces. So Alpha Team doing great on this push. Bravo Team doing great on this push. And the eco that Just an Addict is starting to build. A nice barracks from Blue to deal with this barracks. And then also, I mean, have buildings for when all of this dies, because at this point I think everything's gonna go. There's only 2 SAMs here, this red artillery, and there's some helicopters showing up for Bravo Team. So this push is going to stop very quickly 3 more factories on the way for fantasy. And I think we're witnessing a little bit of a reset in the game. Justnatic's building some more buildings pretty close to the front lines. We'll have to see if either of these buildings actually produce a unit before this red artillery destroys everything. It's still relatively low eco for both teams. There's not really any like development of these farms or these towns and ports. The trade routes as well still haven't been built. It's generally a very scrappy game. Blue's going to take out this teal barracks in the bottom left. And I suppose there's no SAMs here anymore for Yosef. So the helicopters are going to get great value. It's still such a massive artillery that it'll be tough to clear this in time. Igor King about to lose this last airport. Rebuilding their base over here. There is a little bit of a choke at this point of the map, so maybe Igor could defend in the bottom left while waiting for Yosef to destroy most of the stuff on the northern part of the map. We gotta get some kill counters in the game to see how many units this helicopter's been able to get rid of. Because there's still no SAMs here, there's not enough infantry. You'll see them shooting at the helicopter, but there's just not enough infantry to actually destroy that helicopter. 2 more factories for fantasy in a very central location, which will help to start building an army to maybe push against Yosef at some point in time. And Igor's going to be reduced to 3 barracks and a factory. This is great digging in on these last buildings to at least buy some time. Here comes some bombers for red. There's 4 SAMs. 4 SAMs in the south and 4 SAMs in the north. That's definitely going to be enough to handle this. But on the other hand, there's not really enough to handle this if you're orange and Bravo team in general. Commandos are, I mean, I guess I said this is a great defensive line, but ultimately if the commandos just show up behind it, all sneaky, it doesn't really matter. So great snipe from those 2 teal commandos. And if there's any chance of Justnatic surviving here, I think conceptually teal would need to push very hard right now to try to reinforce from this side of the fight and distract a bunch of these artillery units. And this might be what's happening right now. And it is what's happening right now. Yosef's gonna meet them though. Which, unless these 4 helicopters can really clear all these artillery pieces before this is over, which they might, it's pretty tough for Justnatic to stay on this landmass. The factories in the north and the barracks are the insurance policy when all this falls. And this is only a matter of time until this is destroyed. And in general, I think Igor is destroyed because there's only going to be 2 factories to handle what's going to be 4 factories that Fantasy could use to push this. Here comes some bombers from Fantasy. They'll speed up this push once they get rid of all these bombers and infantry. It's Interceptor Bomber out of Fantasy, out of the 2 airports. I'm beginning to get a pool of artillery. I suppose one thing that could happen is that Igor King actually builds up enough units, retakes all of this, and starts the push. And then Yosef and Igor sandwich this position of Fantasy. So that could be a possible good thing that could get set up for Alpha Team. Clearly a good thing for Alpha Team is that they're destroying all of this infrastructure for just an addict who's doing a little bit of an evacuation here with these last remaining infantry and building a rocket on the top right island in an airport. Unless this northern, the like 3 factories and 1 barracks in the north for Just Natick gets set up, Alpha Team's done a great job to now deny the possibility of building these trade routes. They won't necessarily be able to build them themselves because of these 3 cruisers. As long as they're a little protected, they'll be able to shut that down. But sometimes denying economy is just as good as having economy. Large blob of artillery from Fantasy is building a forward airstrip to start handling some of these bombers, which would put them in range of all of these buildings and the reinforcements to soften them up before they get to the front. And here goes Yosef converging on these last buildings, which they've definitely spotted at this point. It'll be very difficult for Just Natick to defend this. Some of the buildings with the 2 cruisers, the cruisers could provide fire support from water. So these buildings are relatively close to the water's edge, so the the cruisers are going to be able to help out a little bit. We've seen sometimes in this Line War cast series that people build the buildings as close to the water as they can to provide support with the cruisers as they build and produce units. And it is a very strong play. Fantasy's got bombers, obviously perfect for the situation. There's only artillery here. And Just Now is going to reset this game with 1/3 of a rocket and 3 helicopters. Well, 4 helicopters, I suppose. On this top right island. The rocket's going to be in range of this choke, which is good. So if Yosef tries to push through here to attack Fantasy, this will provide great cover for that. Now this is a lot of infantry for Igor King. And the infantry in general counter the artillery pieces, and it's mostly only artillery bomber down here for Teal. So here are these cruisers helping out from the water. Red's moving through this mountain range and the artillery isn't really fighting all at once. So Orange is going to get a good initial trade on this. And then obviously the lack of SAMs for Red with these 3 helicopters, 4 helicopters, will likely actually be enough to make sure that this doesn't fall. Because Yosef is now fully in a fight with Fantasy here. And now we have to see how effective this push from blue out of the bottom left is. And whether it can thin out any of these units indirectly by making it so that all of these factories can't contribute to this fight. Rocket is almost done. The cap's about to be put on it. It doesn't necessarily have a great target right now. I suppose this is like a decent target. Good number of bombers for Fantasy. There's no SAMs necessarily in range right now. So this may be enough for Yosef to turn this battle and get through the mountains, which is one of the most crucial parts about this fight. And just Nag's gonna be fine in the top right. These helicopters and this mountain range really coming in clutch. More barracks, so it's gonna be whatever this is, six barracks and 2 factories for blue to counter push. There's only 2 SAMs for this many bombers. So Fantasy has a window of opportunity here to destroy these SAMs, reduce the SAM count, and then start bombing the heck out of those positions. And I think the longer that blue defends here, it's actually worse for them. Because right now they have the numbers advantage with the infantry, and if they all just attack this artillery, they'd be able to start destroying some of these buildings. And crucially taking back a lot of this economy taken away from Teal. And giving themselves an econ boost. Just Nag's got the city going so they can afford all these factories. It's 5 factories total, the 5th one being built right now. In a very forward position. And once this sets up, Yosef's going to be in probably even a lot of trouble if Fantasy pushes and Just Nag does as well. There's really not that much that Red has here. Luckily it's a choke, so they could dig in a bunch of artillery. An artillery SAM out of this factory. The SAMs are getting a few of the bombers. There's only a handful left on that airstrip. Here comes the rocket. The first rocket. And it will speed up this push from orange since there's no more units in that mountain range, so they're going to be able to start moving out pretty quick. Big snipe from these commandos on these 4 bombers. And the commandos are actually all the way to the far left. And we'll be able to get this city as well, or this airport as well. Wild explosions, they look wonderful. So now that all these artillery are here, this is a tough fight since they're all deployed. And this is really bad news for Alpha Team because Yosef's going to start getting pushed back on. And I think Igor's time is numbered at this point. I mean, there's a good push through the forest. The infantry get that forest bonus. And they're providing good cover for these artillery pieces. But this is a pretty big blob. So Yosef is deciding that the north is actually the more important thing. And I don't necessarily disagree to get rid of Just Nag from this landmass. These 2 commandos, great play. This is the vision that Alpha Team has. So now that these units are getting closer, they're starting to see it, but really besides the audio indication, commandos are very sneaky, folks. Great play. So there isn't no other rocket on the way. Orange can't afford it. So it's just a launch pad at this point. It's kind of a tense situation. It's a good time for Fantasy to counter push, which is exactly what's happening. And these commandos are going to at least draw a little bit of the army for Red from fighting in the north. Which is very key to this. And these helicopters just getting so much value. Second refinery for Just an Addict. They need it. These helicopters actually can't fly. That's the black plumes of smoke, which I mention very often. That when they have black plumes of smoke, they take more damage for the next 5 seconds when they're out of energy. If there's enough SAMs and anti-air for Yosef here, and they take out the helicopters, Defender's advantage is still very tough to counter, which is what Just an Addict has. But there's a chance that Red could destroy this entire base. It's really these helicopters that are doing a great job for Orange. And over time, this is going to be a problem for Red. This artillery army, which crucially is going to, at the very least, interrupt all the reinforcements that could be going here. Great pickup from Blue to destroy that factory, and they will. We can check the incomes. Yosef's making a decent amount of money, and Fantasy is making a lot of money. And it's gonna start spending some of it on these forward factories. Because all this territory is actually Teal's, right? Like Blue, it's a tough position. But if Blue could get out of this and start capping some of this back, it would at least make it a little bit better. But we just saw that Fantasy's actually making a ton of money at the moment. So the helicopters are going to be able to stop this push of Reds in the north. Yosef's going to have to get involved in this fight. It's going to be... I don't know how I have such a tough time counting groups of twos. 6 factories and a barracks pushing against... What is this? We got 6 factories for Yosef. So it's an even fight, but then this throws it all out of proportion. All out of whack. There's a chance that Orange might lose 1 factory, but maybe 2. But in general, we'll stabilize with all these helicopters. There's actually a rocket on the way, which is gonna end up being used as a defensive rocket. Because if all goes well, Orange is going to push past the point of the rocket's range anyway. Okay, here comes this counter push from the bottom left from Blue, who will start to take away all the economy from Fantasy. So 1 factory goes down in the north. Second one might fall, but the 4 helicopters are on top of this, and there's no SAMs for Red. And someone was saying in the Discord that they hope they use the free camera in the tournament, but I just don't know how to... Like, how do you use this? Look at this. How do you... Look, I can't even move this thing around. I'm trying to get a cool shot, but now I'm just above it. I guess I gotta learn how to do that for good battles. Like, how about here? Do I go here? This is the immersion we need. Okay, that artillery piece won that 1v1. And we were in the special viewing mode to see it. This 5 helicopters for Orange and 2 refineries now. So clutch, because Red doesn't have any SAMs. And can't really afford to make SAMs for the north because of this impending massive artillery push from Teal. This is great news for Alpha Team. Igor's going to be able to destroy a airport, maybe even some factories. What's key is that this actually puts a lot of pressure on Fantasy with all these new buildings. Because you need to keep all these units here to defend against the Red's push. But now blue is going to actually have a non-trivial amount of units and taking away all this economy. And with all that extra production that Teal's made, it's important that they keep their economy high to be able to use all those production units, or production facilities. Red might have good success here, or not. These factories are now starting to produce the units required to defend itself. And I think in general, a lot of this game hinges on how effective this counter push from Igor can be, and so far it seems relatively decent. But Fantasy continues to pay for a lot more production facilities to defend both of these attacks. And slowly over time, Justin Ag is going to be able to push back from this position and get involved in this fight. Okay, here comes another town from Just an Addict. If Bravo team can get this trade route up, they will just be able to pay for this win. Good city from Yosef. I'm not even sure when that was created. Igor's making great progress here. He's going to get 2 more factories and cap a lot of this territory. And good use of the bombers from Yosef to only take on these artillery pieces. There's no SAMs here as of yet. It's a pretty big front of fighting. 4 barracks are certainly not going to be able to stand up against this many artillery pieces at this point. And there are a decent amount of SAMs here for Just an Addict. So the red bombers aren't going to be super effective up there. This is a lot of units from blue. And more units showing up. So if Bravo team counter pushes, or sorry, Alpha team counter pushes, once they get to this choke, it becomes within range of this rocket. This is a great defensive rocket now for Bravo team because it can defend a big push in the north against Just an Ag's base, or in the south that gets at the heart of Fantasy's base. Yosef's starting to win in this mountain range, which is great timing because Igor's about to put a lot of pressure on Fantasy here. There is actually another rocket at all these barracks. Helicopter's in a little bit of a tough position. And both of them go down. But the barracks are now destroyed. This gives Just an Addict a pretty clear lane towards this. Let's see if Yosef decides to dig in there. A lot of push and pull in this game, so using this rocket for Just an Addict means that they can't use it here if Igor decides to just even move command into this part of the map to really surround all of this production for Fantasy. But that might not be what Blue is planning anyway. There's another rocket on the stand now for Just an Addict, which would probably even just be in time if Igor really decided to push this at this point. This rocket would probably be done by the time this is actually getting threatened. Here comes some tanks for Fantasy. Let's see where these things decide to go. It is a dig-in from Yosef in the top right, which I think is a great call. The only thing really missing from this position is Doug and Sam's. And this is a lot of units. They're definitely going to be able to get at least 3 of these factories. We'll see how quick these factories in the back for Fantasy get turned on There's still a decent amount of money, but Fantasy's income is no longer as great as it was because of all the production that was put down. Great reinforcements from Justin Attic with these helicopters. But the bombers are going to cause a huge problem for Bravo team. And it's tough because if you're Teal, you don't really want to build SAMs right now. You want to be building artillery to handle the opponent's army and all this infantry. SAMs get moved up. Once they get to this central location, these helicopters are going to unfortunately be useless for Alpha Team. Great combined arms push with all this artillery and infantry and tanks from Bravo Team. And Justin Attic started to put down more infrastructure on this main island. And they will have that rocket ready to go. Yeah, I don't know. This is just so hard for me to use. I never know where I'm going to land. Oh, let's go here. Okay, lesson learned. We're way too zoomed in. There we go. It's all going to kind of hinge on how this choke in the map works. We can see that Teal's losing all their factories here, so it's going to kind of reset to the original game state. And it'll be so tough for Alpha Team to actually push through this choke because this rocket is here. It's probably going to get launched pretty quickly against all these blue units. Great push from Justin Attic. They can't get through here, so they're going to dig in and direct like most of the army towards this and probably to help out against blue. And unfortunately for Teal, these tanks are actually out of, like, they're struggling with the energy, because if these tanks could just get all the way around this on top of the city, there are bombers at home for Yosef to be able to defend it, but it just means every time that the tanks do this, the bombers can't be all the way out at the front helping out. Okay, big moment here. The SAMs are going to help take out all the helicopters. Now that the helicopters are on target and hovering, they might be able to get all the SAMs. Blue has a little bit of infantry that's kind of underneath the helicopter, so that will help out. In fact, I think that's what happened there. The infantry actually killed this helicopter, and they might get another one, and they do. And relatively soon, this rocket, unless the rocket doesn't actually reach, the rocket might not reach this far. And that's a miscalculation by me. Okay, so here goes these tanks exactly against the city. See Yosef's reaction time, it's pretty clutch. So the tanks are going to do some damage, but they're not going to be able to actually destroy the city. Just Navic going for more airports. And there's no real time now for Fantasy to dig in this choke, unfortunately. There's not a ton of planes at home to defend this. So this might be a lot of damage. Blue's done a great job to pool up the amount of units that will be able to actually mount a very like swift and forceful counterattack. Instead of, like, you know, like trickling or trying little counterattacks here and there. Tanks get cleared up. That's kind of expected. And the 3 towns are built. There's still no ports. The SAM number for blue is now relatively low. So the 5 helicopters are going to do a ton of damage. They're going to clear the SAMs pretty quick. But blue might just have enough infantry to try to just A-move this. They get rid of 1 artillery piece. But I don't think there's actually enough infantry. Certainly not to destroy all of these buildings. They might get 1 factory. And this is very scary, this blob of artillery here. As soon as the bombers launch, there's only 3 SAMs in this forest, so the bombers can definitely get rid of this, but In the meantime, Red's probably going to lose a factory. Here comes the rocket. And it must reach this far. Dock now for fantasy. Maybe for transport boats or missile boats. Or even cruisers. And pretty ideal targeting. I think only one teal infantry died there. Cruisers could also work because they're going to sit on the coast and be able to hit a lot of the units to try to get through this pass. So that is the one deterrent that Justnak just used. If blue can get enough units through this choke... I mean, they clearly can't before teal regroups. Yosef is going to defend against this. The town being damaged means that Yosef's actually spending a lot of money to repair that town, so their income is a little bit stunted for a second. And as I say that, clearly it's not that big of a deal because Yosef's going to build a rocket in the north. The RNG gods blessed Red here because the bombers are actually only going to get involved with all these SAMs at the end of their bombing run. The only bad thing for Red is they're going to lose at least 2 of these bombers. And Justin Addict and Fantasy are going to link up again now. Igor's trying to get more economy. And be back in the situation where Igor's going to have to defend this position, really. Because they're not going to be able to take on both yellow and red without... or yellow and teal without red's support. No third rocket yet. Great counter push from Yosef. So this is going to stop any reinforcements that yellow can send to the south. There you go. Free cam mode. More industry for Just Nag, that's good. To make more money. I think this game looks a lot different if this trade route got set up early on. Because that would be a lot of economy. But this is a very interesting game. I mean, we're hour 10 minutes in and we are pretty much back at the original state of the game. Red and yellow are going to clash in the north. It's going to be a relatively even fight. Let's see how quickly Yosef can get this rocket up. They don't have the money for it right now. This is a lot of helicopters from Justin Addict. And maybe Justin Addict has enough money to power through this. So red's at 1070 economy. Yellow's at 1132. Teal is now at 915. And blue is at, what did I just see? 735. So it's still super low on the eco. This is the map split. A little bit more for Bravo team. Very good push from Justin Addict. And maybe with the help of Teal, I think Igor's just going to be unable to defend this. I think blue would have to just know that all of this is going to die. They're not going to have any gas, and they're going to have to dig into these mountain ranges and protect these towns. Great call to put down 2 more factories. That's definitely needed. Or at least something to deal with that counter push. Just an absolute enormous amount of artillery on the field. The rocket is 1/3 done for red. This is now a very scary rocket, because if Yosef can get this off and destroy all of these buildings for orange, it again changes the game. There's a handful of SAMs up here, but there's a lot of helicopters. If Yosef gets enough SAMs to go with all this artillery and they can buy enough time to get this rocket off, like, I think that's the best case scenario. But can that happen before Blue is knocked out of the game? These are transport boats, so Fantasy will likely start moving across this channel pretty quickly to cut down on all this transit time around the outside. Someone's destroying their own stuff. Okay, yeah. It is Igor, who's giving up this refinery. And let's see where they decide to dig in. Or rather, I think a dig in is going to be super necessary here. Let's see where and how quickly the reaction's made. Unless Yosef can get into the fight, that will change things. Then Blue wouldn't want to be dug in and would actually want to contribute to this sandwiching. Rocket is nearly 2/3 of the way done. And Justin Addict has another rocket on the way. At all this artillery, and then a counter push from Yellow is going to be pretty deadly. And will probably seal the game because now you're going to have Bravo team on the offensive fully and Alpha team on the defensive. Poor little Yellow infantry took some of that blast. But that clears the push. This rocket's going to finish for Red. Because Yosef's digging in. Now this is a good dig-in. Okay, so here's the dig-in from Blue. Relatively decent setup. And the SAMs are dug in, which is big because these bombers are circling. Fantasy's putting down 3 more factories. In fact, 6 more factories, pardon me. So Blue definitely on borrowed time. I think it's going to come down to Red using this rocket and then seeing how strong of a counter push Red can mount. But with all these helicopters, this is a pretty dire situation for Alpha Team. Okay, Igor is going to start sending the infantry forward. And maybe their artillery as well. So this is Igor's view. It's just such an enormous army. And this is a lot of helicopters. Here comes the rocket. We probably assume that it's going to go towards... Wait, I've learned my lesson. Here we go. Is this what we want to see? Another rocket's actually on the stand for Red. So they could do this again. It's gonna get 4 buildings probably. Okay, it only gets 3. I'm looking around as if there's another rocket. I think that was just an audio thing. Yeah, the rocket pad's being destroyed because the launch pad rather. This game, I think, is over. 3 factories isn't going to be enough. This standing army for Yellow is going to be able to super clear through here. There's only 1 bomber left for Red because of the strong SAM placements. And now we look for Bravo Team to start building trade routes. Will this SAM get the bomber? Wow, it does. Next time someone talks to Infenzi, tell him that he did a great job on the planes exploding effects. I've already said it, but it needs to be said again. Another bomber gets taken out. And we can do an econ check. 1,000 for Red. 1194 for Orange. 983 for Teal. And 615 for Igor, pardon me. who is in a very tough position after this combined push from yellow and teal, and now all these new factories. And now we wait. It probably wouldn't feel like super... I don't want to say it's even obvious that the game is over, but I think it probably is. But sometimes in Line War it's tough to tell when you're playing it, when you're in the moment. You know what I mean? I don't know, I've heard in the Discord people saying that some people don't, like... I'm not saying that Alpha Team's staying too long or anything like that, but people saying, like... You know, they didn't leave quick or whatever. It's very difficult to know, I think. So give your opponent credit the next time it happens. A lot of helicopters. And no Sims. More factories on the way for red. But now I think it's just going to be an eco win because there's no possible way that Eager is going to be able to hold this off. No matter how many defensive lines are here, because it's fundamentally just 2 factories against 6 factories for teal. And a decent amount of bombers. Blue actually... Alpha Team still holds these 2 territories. What would be a cool play is to just try to build a proxy barracks, but I think everything would be in sight. Unfortunately. Here come these ports. First one's on the way. Three airport helicopter crushing it right now. And it's the strength of helicopters once they're just hovering over their target. Great timing on all these SAMs popping for red. Well, if you're interested in how SAMs like trade with helicopters, this is your answer. Great choke point up in the north. It's going to take so long for this to actually clear. This position will stay static for like a little bit. I mean, the red artillery is kind of derping out a little bit because I think all the units and the buildings. But that'll be pretty static. The real problem is that this choke is big enough that there's going to be a decent amount of teal artillery shooting. And with 6 factory against 2, it's only a matter of time. The best case scenario is that as these teal artillery show up to the defensive line, all this infantry would just stop defending and then jump out to try to get on top of the artillery before they deploy. But I think with this many artillery and this many infantry, the artillery might just be able to take it. I always find helicopters shooting at bombers kind of weird. Not weird. It looks cool. I'm in for anything that has a projectile, but it's just funny to me. Imagining a helicopter shooting at like a potentially high altitude bomber. Big commando movement. And these things will probably loop around. Again. Certainly when that city falls for Yosef. That becomes like an unwinnable situation. Here comes the port for Just an Addict. So last remaining will be this port for Fantasy. And when that's online, it's 3 trade routes worth of income. For Bravo. This push starts. And we'll probably end the game. Here, let's just get a good picture, huh? Look at that. Wonderful. Line wars, ladies and gentlemen. I know there's like a little bit of talk about changing the AI for defending lines. And I think that would make them so much stronger, but it's probably necessary. Just because they did, whoops, side right, I can't circle stuff on screen. They just like derp out when units are trying to get into them. Like in what's going on in the bottom here, these artillery pieces trying to dig in. I guess in general it's supposed to separate your defensive lines by type a little bit more, but it's like naturally the units will just walk all over each other. Anyway, if you want to hear me like rant and rave about stuff, this wonderful game, you can check me out on Twitch. Same handle, SodaQuackers. I have no idea what time it would be in your time zone for when I stream, but 3 p.m. Pacific time on Monday and Wednesdays, and then whenever else I can, but I can't have a schedule for it. Yosef's actually doing a pretty good job to hold this off. I mean, this did take forever, this choke to clear, but now that we're seeing it clear, this will speed up a little bit. These units are actually cap moving, so they're not all just going to push and attack while there's a numbers advantage. They're spending some time capping the territory, or at least attempting to. Okay, defensive line breaks because this is a tough situation. This is the last push for blue. They know it, so they're going to jump. I mean, this is the right call. What else are you going to do? The longer this goes on, the worse it is. And unless we're seeing a secret rocket anywhere. This is just too many artillery. Whoops. Don't mind me. Also, if you're wondering how to do this when you're in replay mode, just press Z. And that's right, it's called Z, okay? I'm just joking. Folks who say Z. Z for free camera, C for the commands. And if you want to see what people, like the way that things are responding to commands, you can press V as well, and it will toggle between all the players, the one team, etc. I don't know why, just maybe that's useful. You can also click this thing in the top left. I should probably just make a video on the replay interface if that's useful. And there you go, you got all the hotkeys. Okay, trade route is connected. Now the most overpowered... Actually, this will be the thumbnail. Not the thumbnail, sorry, but like the picture we're going to take. There you go. Merchant ships. Clearly the coolest unit in the whole game. And if you don't agree, then get at me in the comments and say what your favorite unit is and how it's not the merchant ship. These commandos are exhausted. Slow motion running towards this gas. With all this fatigue that they've taken. From running so fast. From sprinting. They're gonna get the refinery though, and they're also gonna be able to get the city. And there goes blue. Igor is out. It was, I mean, it was a great pushback. Midway through the game. Very, very cool game. GG's. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it. That was a 2v2 on Line War. Here's your graphs. Income was actually relatively close. What else do we care about? Upkeep? Yeah, also very close. I hope you have a wonderful night, evening, day, whatever it is for you. Check out the Line War Discord if you want to learn more about the game. Find games, chat with folks, and again, twitch.tv/SodaQuackers. See you soon. Peace.